The image that still defines everything for me. The one you'd freeze if you wanted people to feel betrayal instead of just hear about it. Took place in a quiet suburban house in Plano, Texas. I was standing in the doorway of my own living room, suit jacket still on, phone clenched in my hand, while the people I trusted most sat on my couch speaking about my life as if I wasn't even there. My brother leaned forward, confident. My wife wouldn't look at me. And the lawyer they'd invited cleared his throat like this was just another Tuesday. That was the moment I understood something important. Betrayal rarely announces itself loudly. It shows up calm, polite, and prepared. If you're listening right now, stay with me. Because what happened next wasn't rage. It wasn't violence. It was something far more dangerous. And before I go any further, if you appreciate real, grounded stories about strength, control, and quiet revenge, take a second to subscribe. Hit like if this already feels familiar. And tell me in the comments, what city or state are you watching from right now? I read them all. Now let me slow this down. Because the truth is, this didn't start in that living room. It started months earlier, when I trusted the wrong people for the wrong reasons. My name is John Carter, and this is the story of how I learned that loyalty isn't proven by words. It's proven by what people do when they think you're not paying attention. At the time, I was 35 years old, working as a senior project manager for a commercial construction firm based out of Dallas. Good money, long hours, the kind of job that rewards discipline but punishes hesitation. I was the dependable one, the man who fixed problems quietly, the one who stayed late, the one everyone leaned on when things got complicated. At home, I believed I had the same role. I was married to Emily Carter, my wife of 7 years. Smart, organized, the kind of person who kept life running smoothly while I focused on work. And then there was my younger brother, Mark Carter. Mark had always been different. Charismatic, fast-talking, always chasing the next big idea, the next shortcut, the next opportunity that promised success without patience. Growing up in Fort Worth, my parents used a joke that I was the engine and Mark was the steering wheel. I took things forward. He decided where they went. I didn't realize how dangerous that combination could be. The first crack appeared during what should have been a routine conversation. Mark called me late one night. "John, I need advice," he said. That alone should have been my first warning. He told me he was struggling financially. Bad investments. Poor timing. Nothing criminal, just the usual excuses wrapped in confidence. "I just need some help getting back on my feet," he said. I listened. I offered guidance. I even connected him with a few people I trusted in Arlington and Irving. But then he asked for something else. "Would you consider co-signing on a business loan?" he asked. "Just temporarily." I hesitated. If you've ever been in this position, you know that moment, the pause where instinct whispers no, but loyalty argues yes. I didn't say yes right away. I told him I'd think about it. That night, Emily encouraged me. "He's your brother," she said gently. "And you're good with money. You'd be helping him stabilize." I wanted to believe that. So I agreed, under strict terms. Limited exposure. Clear boundaries. What I didn't know was that Mark had already crossed his own. Over the next few weeks, subtle changes crept into my life. Mark stopped asking questions and started making statements. Emily began taking phone calls in the other room. Paperwork showed up that I didn't remember approving. Nothing concrete. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to make me uneasy. If this sounds familiar, if you've ever felt something was off but couldn't yet prove it, stay with me. Because what's coming next is where denial becomes danger. I asked Emily directly one night, "Is there something you're not telling me?" I said. She smiled. Too quickly. "Of course not," she replied. Mark reassured me too. "You're overthinking it, man," he said. "You always do that." That's another lesson worth remembering. People who are lying don't always get defensive. Sometimes they get dismissive. The truth surfaced slowly. A credit alert I didn't recognize. A document copied with my name misspelled. A bank call asking to confirm activity I hadn't initiated. I started digging. Carefully. Quietly. And what I found wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. Mark had used my credibility to secure funding under a shell company. Emily, whether intentionally or through trust, had helped by providing access to documents I kept at home. Together, they hadn't just put me at risk. They'd positioned me as the fall guy. If the business collapsed, the debt would land squarely on me. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Because men who rush toward confrontation usually lose. Men who prepare don't. I met with an attorney in Frisco under the excuse of a lunch break. I laid everything out. Documents, emails, timelines. He listened quietly. Then he said something that stuck with me. "You still control the outcome," he said. "But only if you don't reveal that you know." That was the moment I stopped reacting and started planning. If you think this is where things explode, you're wrong. The explosion comes later. First, there's silence. And in that silence, I made the decision that would change everything. I decided not to save my marriage, not to rescue my brother, but to protect myself. And that choice came with consequences no one else saw coming. For the next 2 weeks, I played the role they expected. I came home on time. I kissed my wife on the cheek. I answered my brother's calls like everything was normal. Inside, I was building a case. Not an emotional case. A legal one. Because here's what I've learned about betrayal, especially when it comes from people close to you. They don't fear your anger. They fear your proof. And I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me break before I had what I needed. The first thing I did was lock down my life quietly. I changed passwords on everything. Banking, email, cloud storage. I added two-factor authentication and removed Emily's access to shared financial apps we used for years. I didn't announce it. I did it like a man fixing a leak before the storm hits. Then I opened a new bank account at a different branch in Richardson, under my name only, and moved my direct deposits there. Not all of it, just enough to create distance. You might ask, why not move everything? Because sudden changes create suspicion. And suspicion makes liars defensive. I wanted them relaxed. I wanted them confident. That's how you catch people. Mark called me 3 days later. "Everything good?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just busy." He laughed. "Always busy. That's why I love you, man. You're solid." Solid. That word used to feel like a compliment. Now it sounded like what they thought I was. A foundation they could stand on while they did whatever they wanted. I started documenting every interaction, every text, every email, every call log. I installed a small camera in the hallway by my home office, legally positioned to record my doorway and the file cabinet where I kept important documents. Not to spy on my wife in private spaces, just to protect the area where sensitive paperwork mysteriously disappeared from. Within 4 days, I caught Emily opening that cabinet while I was at work. She didn't take anything. She just looked, like she was checking whether something was missing. That told me enough. She knew. Or, at least, she suspected I was waking up. Here's the part one wants you to think about, and drop in the comments if you've ever experienced it. When someone betrays you, they don't always look guilty. Sometimes they look nervous, because they're waiting for you to notice. Emily started acting softer than usual, cooking my favorite meals, asking about my day, touching my arm when she spoke. A month earlier, I would have believed it was love. Now I knew it was control. Mark did the same thing in his own way. He started calling more often, asking how I was feeling, making jokes about us building something big together. Then one night, he said it plainly. "John, we should put your name on a few more documents," he said casually, "just to strengthen the paperwork for the lender. It's temporary." I paused. This was the trap. If I signed, I'd be locked in deeper. If I refused too aggressively, he'd know I was suspicious. So I did what men with discipline do. I gave him a calm answer that bought time. "Send me what you want me to review," I said. "I'll look at it when I'm free." "Perfect," he said. "Knew I could count on you." And the moment he hung up, I forwarded the call notes to my attorney. The next move was the hardest one. I needed to know whether Emily was a partner in this or just a pawn. Because there's a difference between being manipulated and choosing to manipulate. I watched her patterns, her phone habits, the way she left rooms when she took certain calls. Then I checked something I'd avoided checking out of respect. Our shared phone bill. There were dozens of short calls between her and Mark. Sometimes late at night. Sometimes during my work hours. Sometimes minutes after I received banking notifications. That wasn't coincidence. That was coordination. My chest tightened, not with rage, but with that cold, sinking confirmation that makes you feel like you're standing alone in your own life. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more than suspicion. I needed the thing that ends arguments instantly. A paper trail. I met my attorney again, this time in Addison, in a small office complex behind a row of restaurants. He reviewed what I'd gathered. He didn't look surprised. "This is fraud," he said calmly. I nodded. "I know. You have options," he continued. "Civil action, criminal referral, restraining order, divorce proceedings." Divorce. The word didn't scare me. What scared me was the idea of staying. I asked him one question. How do I protect myself without tipping them off? He leaned back. "Let them keep moving," he said. "You keep recording. Then you decide the moment you pull the floor out from under them. Pull the floor out." That's exactly what I planned to do. But not in a way that made me look like the villain. In a way that made the truth undeniable. Over the next week, Mark pushed harder. He texted me documents to sign. I pretended to review them, asked small clarifying questions that made me look careful, not suspicious. Emily watched me more closely, asked who I was talking to, offered to help organize paperwork. I thanked her, and locked my real documents somewhere she couldn't reach. One night, she finally slipped. We were sitting on the couch in our Plano house, the TV playing something neither of us was watching. She said softly, "You know you can trust Mark." It wasn't a question. It was a test. I turned toward her slowly. I made my face calm. "I do," I said, and I watched relief spread across her expression, like she'd just escaped a cliff edge. That told me something else. She was scared. Not of what they were doing. Of getting caught. If you're still here, I need you to stay a little longer. Because the next step wasn't just protecting myself. It was turning the trap back on them. And the way I did it was quiet, clean, and so effective that when it finally hit them, there was nothing they could say to defend themselves. In part 3, I'm going to tell you about the document Mark sent me, the one he was sure would finish the job, and how I used it to build the kind of revenge that doesn't end with yelling. It ends with handcuffs. The document arrived on a Thursday morning. Mark emailed it with the subject line, "Final step, then we're done." That alone told me everything I needed to know. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit in my inbox while I finished my coffee, watched the morning news, and let the city of Plano wake up outside my window like nothing in my life was about to change. When I finally clicked the attachment, I understood the game he thought he was winning. It was a personal guarantee. Not partial. Not limited. Total. If I signed that document, every debt tied to his shell company would legally become mine. If the business collapsed or was intentionally mismanaged, I'd be the one holding the bill. Mark hadn't just crossed the line. He'd sprinted past it. If you're listening and thinking, how could someone do that to their own brother? I asked myself the same thing. But betrayal doesn't require hatred. It only requires opportunity. I forwarded the document to my attorney within minutes. His response came back fast. "This is the one," he wrote. "If he's pushing this, it means they're close to executing." Executing. That word stayed with me, because that's exactly what it felt like. They were preparing to end one version of my life and walk away clean. I wasn't going to let that happen. But I also wasn't going to stop them too early. So I replied to Mark. "Looks good," I wrote. "I'll sign once I review it tonight." That message bought me something priceless. Time. That evening, I came home later than usual on purpose. Emily was in the kitchen, phone face down on the counter. She looked up too quickly when I walked in. "Long day?" she asked. "Yeah," I said calmly. "I've got some paperwork to go through later." Her shoulders relaxed. That told me more than any confession ever could. We ate dinner in near silence. The kind that feels heavy even when no one is arguing. Halfway through the meal, Emily reached across the table and touched my hand. "You know," she said softly, "whatever happens, we're a team." That was the moment I knew she wasn't just complicit. She was committed. Here's something men don't talk about enough. Betrayal hurts more when it comes from someone who sleeps next to you. Not because you're weak, but because you let your guard down. And trust, once weaponized, cuts deeper than anger ever could. I nodded at Emily, smiled. "Of course," I said. Then I went to my office and did something that would decide the outcome of everything. I recorded. In Texas, as long as you're part of the conversation, you can legally record it. So I called Mark. I didn't accuse him. I didn't challenge him. I asked questions. "Just so I understand," I said casually, "this guarantee only applies to me, right?" "Yes," he replied. "That's how lenders feel secure." "And Emily's not on it?" I asked. "No need," he said. "You're the stable one." I paused. "And if the company fails?" There was a brief silence. Then Mark said something he thought was harmless. "That won't matter," he said. "You've got assets." That sentence ended the conversation, because it proved intent. I saved the recording, backed it up, labeled it clearly. Then I did something else. I asked Emily a question I already knew the answer to. I walked back into the kitchen and said, "Mark wants me to sign something tonight. You've seen it, right?" She froze. Just for half a second. But half a second is all it takes. "Yes," she said carefully. "He mentioned it. Do you think it's safe?" I asked. She met my eyes. "I think it's necessary," she replied. Necessary. Not fair. Not temporary. Necessary. That word told me everything about where her loyalty lived. I slept on the couch that night. Not because I was angry. Because clarity makes it impossible to pretend. The next morning, I put my plan into motion. Step 1. I sent the signed document. But not the one they thought. My attorney had prepared a nearly identical version, except this one redirected liability back to the shell company and included clauses that triggered mandatory audits if certain conditions were met. Mark didn't read carefully. People who believe they're smarter than you rarely do. He replied within minutes. "Perfect," he wrote. "This helps a lot." That message felt final. Step 2 happened 3 days later. Mark invited me to meet the lender in Irving, just to wrap things up. I agreed. I showed up calm, prepared, silent. The lender started reviewing documents. Halfway through, he frowned. "There seems to be a discrepancy here," he said. Mark shifted in his chair. "What kind of discrepancy?" he asked. The lender looked up at me. "Mr. Carter, can you explain why this guarantee redirects liability?" I met his eyes. "Because I'm not responsible for fraud," I said. Mark went pale. Emily wasn't there, but her phone started ringing within minutes. The lender excused himself. Lawyers entered the room. And suddenly, everything Mark thought was airtight wasn't. I won't describe the next hour in detail. Not because it wasn't dramatic, but because drama isn't the point. Truth is. The truth came out in documents, in recordings, in timestamps and signatures. And once it surfaced, it didn't matter what Mark or Emily said. Facts don't argue. They conclude. As I walked out of that office in Irving, my phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "We need to talk." I didn't reply, because there was nothing left to explain. If you're still listening, stay with me. Because in the next part, I'll tell you what happened when the legal process began, and how the people who thought they'd won everything suddenly realized they had nothing. Once lawyers get involved, time stops moving the way you're used to. Days stretch, weeks blur, and conversations stop being about feelings and start being about consequences. The lender froze the deal immediately. Mark's accounts were flagged. An internal review turned into a formal investigation faster than anyone expected. Because once financial institutions smell intent, they don't wait for explanations. They follow paper. And Mark had left fingerprints everywhere. I spent the next few days moving through life like a ghost. I still went to work in Dallas. Still answered emails. Still nodded at people in meetings. But underneath all of it, something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was watching. Emily tried everything. She texted first. Please call me. We need to fix this. This isn't what it looks like. Then she showed up at my office parking lot one evening, standing next to her car like she'd been waiting for hours. John, she said when she saw me. You're not answering. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her. I just asked one question. Did you think I wouldn't find out? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. That pause was enough. I didn't think it would go this far, she said finally. That sentence ended our marriage, because it told me she knew exactly what she was doing. She just hadn't planned on consequences. I told her to contact my attorney. Then I walked away. Mark, on the other hand, went quiet. Too quiet. That's usually what happens when people realize the ground under them isn't solid anymore. They stop talking, hoping silence will somehow undo what's already been recorded. It doesn't. 2 weeks later, I was formally notified that criminal charges were being considered for financial fraud and misrepresentation. I wasn't named as a suspect. I was listed as a cooperating witness. That distinction matters. Here's an engagement break. I want to speak directly to you for a moment. If you've ever felt like the responsible one in your family, the one people lean on, exploit, or assume will clean up the mess, understand this. Responsibility does not mean sacrifice without limits. And being calm doesn't mean being weak. The divorce process moved faster than I expected. Emily didn't fight it. Not because she suddenly understood what she'd done, but because her attorney understood what I had. Evidence changes negotiations. We divided assets cleanly. No drama. No drawn-out court appearances. Just signatures. And silence. I moved out of the Plano house and into a smaller apartment in Frisco, closer to work and far from memories that didn't deserve to follow me. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. Mark was arrested on a Tuesday morning. I didn't see it happen. I heard about it from my attorney. Federal charges. Multiple counts. Potential prison time. I sat in my car outside a grocery store when I got the call, engine running, radio low. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No sadness. Just confirmation. This is something people don't tell you about revenge done the right way. It doesn't feel explosive. It feels quiet. Like balance returning. Mark tried to reach me from jail. I didn't answer. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. Because some relationships don't need closure. They need distance. The final hearing came months later. I testified once. Briefly. Factually. Without emotion. I didn't look at him while I spoke. I didn't need to. The judge did. When it was over, I walked out of the courthouse in McKinney, sunlight sharp and clean against the steps. That's when I realized the weight I'd been carrying wasn't anger. It was responsibility that never belonged to me. Life didn't suddenly become perfect, but it became honest. Work felt lighter. Conversations felt real. Silence felt peaceful instead of threatening. I started running in the mornings near White Rock Lake. Reading again. Cooking for myself. Rebuilding, not because I had to, but because I finally could. If you're still listening, stay with me for one last part. Because what comes after revenge isn't triumph. It's identity. And in the final chapter, I'll tell you what I learned about control, self-respect, and the kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, but lasts. After everything ended, I expected to feel lighter. Instead, I felt still. Not empty. Not broken. Just still. The kind of stillness you only feel after chaos leaves your life for good. Weeks passed. Then months. No more legal calls. No more texts from unknown numbers. No more waiting for the other shoe to drop. For the first time in a long time, nothing was chasing me. That's when I realized something important. Most men don't fear conflict. They fear peace, because peace forces you to face who you are without noise. I kept my routine simple. Work during the day in Dallas. Evening runs near White Rock Lake. Quiet dinners at home. I didn't rush into anything new. No dating. No big plans. No announcements about starting over. I let life settle. And in that space, clarity showed up. I started to understand how much of my identity had been wrapped around being dependable. The fixer. The stabilizer. The the man everyone leaned on. Losing my marriage and my brother in one stroke didn't just remove people from my life. It removed a role. And that role had been exhausting. If you're listening and you've always been the strong one, you know exactly what I mean. Strength becomes a cage when no one asks if you're okay inside it. One afternoon, while grabbing coffee in Richardson, I ran into an old coworker. He looked at me for a second, then smiled. "You look different," he said. "Good different or bad different?" I asked. "Calm," he replied, like someone who stopped explaining himself. That stayed with me, because he was right. I wasn't explaining anymore. Not to family, not to coworkers, not to anyone. I didn't owe people access just because they shared history with me. And that realization was more freeing than revenge ever could be. Mark was sentenced quietly. No headlines. No dramatic courtroom scene. Just paperwork and consequences. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. Emily finalized the divorce without resistance. I heard later she moved out of state, trying to reset her life somewhere she wasn't recognized. I wish her no harm, but I don't wish her back either. That's an important difference. Here's a moment I want you to pause on, especially if you're a man listening to this late at night. Revenge doesn't end when the other person loses. It ends when you stop carrying them with you. And one day, without warning, I realized I hadn't thought about them at all. Not Mark. Not Emily. Not the betrayal. I was too busy living a life that finally felt like mine. I started mentoring younger guys at work, not formally, not publicly. Just conversations. They'd ask how I stayed calm under pressure. I never told them the whole story. I told them this instead. Don't confuse being needed with being valued. That line always landed, because most men learn it too late. On a quiet Sunday evening, sitting alone in my Frisco apartment, I thought back to the moment this all began. That living room in Plano. The lawyer. The calm betrayal. If I could speak to the man I was then, I wouldn't tell him to fight harder. I'd tell him this. Pay attention earlier. Trust patterns, not promises. And never hand your future to people who benefit from your silence. If you've stayed with this story until now, I want to leave you with something real. You don't win by destroying everyone who wrongs you. You win by becoming untouchable, by knowing when to walk away, by choosing control over chaos, by keeping your dignity intact while others lose theirs. My name is John Carter, and the day I stopped reacting was the day I took my life back.